to today's video. In today's video, I'm making my prediction for the 2028 federal election between Gavin Newsom with Josh Shapiro as his running mate and JD Vance with Vivek Ramaswamy as his running mate. And so this is going to be my second prediction for the 2028 election, my second video that I'm making with regards to the 2028 election. And so there's several things that I want to go over here, and that is with regards to Gavin Newsom and Josh Shapiro. So Gavin Newsom obviously is a very unpopular governor. If you look at his overall favorability polls, if you look at all the states, you can see here that he has a very low favorability. As you can see, he has only a 27% favorable and 49.2% unfavorable. Now, those numbers are bound to change. If he were to declare him being a nominee, those numbers would obviously change and become much better for him, but he is not that favorable whatsoever. Now, taking a look at where the Donald Trump administration obviously is headed, depending on what type of job and how Donald Trump's favorability is over the next 4 years, that will obviously determine much of what will happen with regards to the next election. And so we have here obviously Donald Trump's, whose favorability rating is not as low as it was before. That being said, it is not super high either. Right now, overall, it's a 46.6% favorable rating. Now, if you're taking a look at the last poll that was taken, showed him with a 49% favorable and 48% unfavorable, although some polls obviously do show him with an extremely low amount of favorable rating and a very high unfavorable rating. Okay, so you can see that there. So you can see there are several of the polls here with an unfavorable rating as well. Now, we look at JD Vance here, you can see that his favorability rating is currently plus 1.6. His unfavorable rating is 42.3%. Favorable rating is 40.7%. You can see here in the most recent poll, his favorable rating is plus 4. But in several other polls, his favorability rating is a little bit down as well. So as you can see here, both Donald Trump and JD Vance roughly have approximately a plus 2% unfavorable rating. So you can see that between these two candidates. They're obviously both more favorable than Gavin Newsom. Now, the question that obviously comes into mind is, what will Josh Shapiro do on the ticket? I believe that Josh Shapiro will definitely help Gavin Newsom out. Because if Josh Shapiro would be the vice presidential candidate for Gavin Newsom, that would definitely end up helping Gavin Newsom. And so this is a very specific case, assuming that Gavin Newsom wins the nomination and he were to pick Josh Shapiro, which if Gavin Newsom did win the nomination, Josh Shapiro would be a very wise decision. He has a very high favorability rating. For those of you who don't know, he is the governor of the state of Pennsylvania. He's a very popular governor. He has, I believe, a 60% approval rating, one poll showed. So he's very popular. And I think that he definitely helped Gavin Newsom win several of the Rust Belt states. Now you have the issue of Vivek Ramaswamy. And I believe that, Vivek Ramaswamy, his favorability rating, this was a long time ago. This was taken a year ago, more than a year ago, actually. Favorable, 24%, unfavorable, 35%. And I don't think Vivek Ramaswamy would be all that favorable. But I think that would be very interesting if Vivek Ramaswamy was selected as the vice presidential candidate. All right, so let's go ahead and start with these individual states. Let's go ahead and start with Washington, Oregon, and California going to the Democrats. Now with JD Vance, he's going to go in Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, North and South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, South Carolina, Kentucky, Indiana, Iowa, Missouri, Utah, and the state of West Virginia. Moving on from there, let's go ahead and give Gavin Newsom the state of Vermont, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, D.C., Rhode Island, and Massachusetts. All right, so you have several of those states right there. We'll give it back to Ramaswamy and J.D. Vance. Nebraska's at large, and Nebraska's first congressional district. We'll go ahead and give J.D. Vance the state of Texas and the state of Florida. All right, the state of Texas and the state of Florida. Texas will go in the likely margin. Ohio will end up winning there. Probably the likely to safe margin. Vivek Ramaswamy obviously has already filed to run for governor of Ohio for the 2026 election there in Ohio in the gubernatorial race. And so I do think that would be very interesting there for Vivek there. Moving on from there, let's take a look at the state of Colorado. It's going to vote safe Democrat. New Mexico is going to be likely Democrat. Alaska will end up voting safe Republican to honestly likely Republican, right, for that state right over there. And then we'll move on to the state of New York, which will end up voting for the Democrats in the safe margin. The state of Illinois will end up voting for the Democrats in the safe margin. And then the state of Virginia and Minnesota, both of them will respectively go in the likely column, for the Democrats. Moving on from there, the state of New Hampshire, very interesting state, only voted for Kamala Harris by less than 3%, but greater than 2.5%. I believe around 2.8% there. So the state of New Hampshire there, a pretty, it's been a Democrat state for quite a few elections. And I think that if Gavin Newsom and Josh Shapiro were on the ticket, I think that it's going to end up voting for the Democrats in the lean to likely margin, to be honest. Lean to likely margin. All right, moving on from there, let's take a look at Maine's at-large vote. Maine at-large vote will end up voting for the Democrats there in the likely margin. Their second congressional district will end up voting for the Republicans, and Maine's first congressional district is safe for the Democrats there. Maine's second congressional district will end up voting for the Democrats in the lean to likely margin there. All right, so we have those states filled out there. Now let's move on to the state of Pennsylvania. If Gavin Newsom and Josh Shapiro are the nominees, now this is assuming that Josh Shapiro is the vice presidential nominee. I'm going to go ahead and give the state of Pennsylvania to the Democrats here. Tilt to lean margin, you could potentially say. It might be the lean margin, but we'll just go ahead and say tilt margin for now. All right, tilt margin for the Democrats. So that puts Gavin Newsom and Josh Shapiro at 241 and J.D. Vance and Vivek Ramaswamy at 219. Now let's take a look at the state of Arizona. Arizona is a state which voted heavily Democrat. And before I continue on, let me go ahead and give the state of Hawaii, obviously, to Gavin Newsom and Josh Shapiro. The state of Arizona voted heavily towards the right in this election. I don't see it going Democrat, regardless of who the nominee is. It's going to be very difficult for any Democrat to win the state of Arizona after the Republicans won the state in this election by more than 5 percentage points. Now, there's a possibility if they put someone up like Carrie Lake or somebody like that, then they could end up possibly losing it. Carrie Lake obviously lost her senator race, her Senate race against Ruben Gallego in the most recent election in 2024. So Arizona, I think, is going to end up voting for the Republicans. It'd be very difficult for Democrats. I don't see them winning the state. We'll go ahead and say for now in the lean margin. Okay, in the lean margin there for that state there. All right. Moving on from there, let's go ahead and give the state of Georgia. Georgia is going to end up voting for the Republicans, voted for Donald Trump by 2%. I'm going to go ahead and put in the tilt margin there, tilt margin for J.D. Vance and Vivek Ramaswamy. Now, tilt margin is less than 2%, but greater than, it's I think like 0.1% for me. And so that's the state of Georgia. Georgia voted for Donald Trump by roughly 2 percentage points there, roughly 2 percentage points. Tilt margin would be 0.1, basically greater than 0 to less than 2%. Okay, is basically what I'd be putting that as. All right, so moving on from there, the state of North Carolina will end up voting for the Republicans there in the tilt margin. Tilt to lean margin, it could end up going in the lean margin 2% or greater. All right, moving on from there, let's go ahead and give the state of Michigan to the Democrats here. The Democrats with Josh Shapiro there and Gavin Newsom in the tilt margin. There. This is a very close election here. You can see Gavin Newsom and Josh Shapiro at 260, J.D. Vance and Vivek Ramaswamy at 262 electoral votes. Moving on from there, obviously the next two states really will decide. Really, Wisconsin could actually decide the election. Obviously, this was Kamala Harris's preferable path to win the presidency. For at least many people saw it as being the preferable path. And if you actually look at the margins within the individual states, the most preferable path for Kamala Harris would have been that blue wall, since she ended up losing those states by the smallest margin. But this obviously was the path that many people saw Kamala Harris potentially taking, due to the fact that she would reach exactly 270 electoral votes, assuming she wins Nebraska's second congressional district, which she did end up winning that district, albeit a smaller margin than Joe Biden won that congressional district. So the state of Wisconsin, very interesting state. It was very interesting in this election, actually, because the state of Wisconsin voted for the Republicans by a smaller margin than both Michigan and Pennsylvania. That was a very interesting phenomenon that we saw in this election that was not true over the past two elections. If you take a look at it, in 2020 and in 2016, the state of Wisconsin voted to the right of Michigan and Pennsylvania in both 2016 and 2020. In 2016, when Donald Trump won the state of Wisconsin, Donald Trump won the state by a larger margin than he won Michigan and Pennsylvania. If you look at 2020, when Donald Trump lost all three of them, he lost the state of Wisconsin by a smaller margin than both of them. But this year in 2024, Wisconsin voted to the left of Michigan and Pennsylvania. Donald Trump still ended up winning the state of Wisconsin, but he won it by a smaller margin than both those two states. All right? So that's a very interesting thing that happened in the most recent election here. So I'm going to go ahead and give the state of Wisconsin for now. Very, very close, I would say. I'm going to go ahead and give it to Gavin Newsom. To be honest with you, I'm not entirely Wisconsin is going to be a very interesting state going up into this election. I could see a JD Vance definitely winning there. Fairly. It definitely is a very much of a swing state. Donald Trump obviously ended up winning the state by a very small margin. This election, Joe Biden ended up winning the state by a very small margin. Donald Trump won this state by a small margin in 2016. A very, very close state, previously a part of the blue wall, but obviously a very close state to be looking at. Uh, I'm honestly not sure. I could see. I mean, to be honest, like JD Vance could end up winning in this state. It would be very interesting. I'm not going to leave for toss up for now. All right. JD Vance, I believe, will end up winning the state of Nevada. It ended up voting for them by 3%, so I'm going to go ahead and put in the tilt margin. They might lose some support there. All right, so the state of Wisconsin, I'm going to go ahead and give it to Gavin Newsom. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and give it to Gavin Newsom there in the tilt margin. All right, so with that being said, we have Gavin Newsom and Josh Shapiro 270 electoral votes, JD Vance and Vivek Ramaswamy at 268 electoral votes. An extremely close presidential election race here, guys. If you like this video, make sure you subscribe button down below and like the video. A very close presidential election. You can see here the two candidates definitely having a very, very close matchup here. And it will definitely be a very close election if these two individuals, with their running mates respectively, were to become the nominees. Now, if Gavin Newsom is the nominee and he were to pick someone who's not that good of a candidate, that would definitely hurt him. Now, he also has the possibility of picking Gretchen Whitmer, who is the governor of the state of Michigan, and that would definitely help him out there. But I think Josh Shapiro is a really safe candidate. I think Josh Shapiro, if he were to tie his entire campaign around Josh Shapiro and Gretchen Whitmer, and try to win maybe one of the Sun Belt states, that would be a pretty good campaign overall. And so, obviously, Gavin Newsom is a much more skilled politician than Kamala Harris is. I think that's undeniable. She's way better at doing interviews than Kamala Harris. He's way good. He goes on. He went on Fox News. He goes on all these different types of outlets, conservative outlets, liberal outlets. He's able to do whatever he wants to do, and he's a very skilled politician compared to Kamala Harris. And Josh Shapiro, I think, is a very he's a relatively popular individual. And I think that if you were to have Gavin Newsom without the baggage of California and Josh Shapiro, I think that would be a great ticket. Now, the question is, obviously, Gavin Newsom's governorship, obviously, in the state of California, it obviously ends in the year 2026. And that will be interesting, obviously, what he's going to do from there. And that'll obviously give him like a 2-year break, depending on what he does. 2-year break in between the presidential election, which obviously, the 2026 midterm election, obviously, he finishes off his term by 2027 in January, right? January of 2027. Then he has maybe a year before not a year. He has basically only a couple of months, actually, right? He only has like about 5 or 6 months before he declares his actual intent to run, probably. And then after that, after the 5 to 6 months is over, he would have to declare that he's running, then go through the entire Democratic primary, and then after about 9 months or so, 8 months or so, he would then have to go, or not a year, really, a year. He would then receive the nomination and then pick Josh Shapiro. It would really be interesting to see how much of his California baggage could really hold on. With JD Vance, obviously, the way that Donald Trump handles the next 4 years will obviously be interesting, very interesting as well. Vivek Ramaswamy, I think his HB1 visa, like some people are making it a big deal, obviously. The question is, obviously, his position on HB1 visas, obviously, Donald Trump did say that he agreed with it, and that will be very interesting to see as we continue forward. But you can decide for yourself whether or not the HB1 visa issue is going to be a top issue in the 2028 federal election. Like, that's a long ways away. And he said this, I think, he said this before Donald Trump was even inaugurated, before Donald Trump was even inaugurated. So that is very interesting there. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe button down below and like the video, and I'll see you in the next video.